In cities that never sleep, beneath the hum of neon lights, behind every door closed tightly for the night, something ancient still lingers. Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, a world where haunted voicemails echo through your phone long after the number is disconnected, where elevators stop on floors that don't exist, where someone or something never moved out of that apartment down the hall. These are not legends from long ago. These are stories that could happen tonight in buildings just like yours. We bring you modern ghost stories rooted in the spirit beliefs that time forgot, but the spirits did not. If you've ever felt watched in your own home, if your phone rings at 3:33 a.m. and no one speaks, if the silence feels too heavy to explain, then maybe you're not alone. Ghosts of Asia. You were never meant to hear these stories, but now it's too late.
It was the kind of apartment people fought over. Tall glass windows, sleek, silent elevators, marble tiles that reflected nothing but clean, clinical perfection. Unit 6B sat on the eastern side of the building, bathed in morning light and shadowed by sunset. It overlooked a distant city skyline, flickering lights, anonymous lives, and for a newlywed couple like May and Arun, it felt like their first real step into adulthood. "It's a good omen," May had whispered the day they signed the lease, cradling the key in her palm like a charm. 6 for luck, B for beginnings. But the key itself was old. It didn't match the others. While the apartment's smart lock worked with facial recognition and PIN codes, the property manager handed them a physical key wrapped in an envelope as if it were something sacred. Its brass surface was dull and scratched, a faint red smudge near the teeth like old rust or something else. "The unit has a backup lock system," the manager explained with a tight smile. "Just in case. Keep this somewhere safe. Some tenants prefer analog." May nodded politely, but something about the way he said "some tenants" felt off. She didn't press. They moved in on a warm Tuesday afternoon. No neighbors came to greet them, though the corridor was quiet and smelled faintly of floor polish and aging concrete. The building was only 7 years old, yet something about the 6th floor felt older, like it had been repurposed, rearranged, like something had been rewritten. May was the kind to notice those things, tiny shifts, odd shadows. As they wheeled their final box into 6B, she paused just beyond the threshold. The air inside the apartment was still, too still. Not empty, not stale. It felt held. A silence with pressure behind it, as though the walls were holding their breath. Arun didn't feel it. He walked in whistling, tossing his backpack onto the sofa, and cracking open a bottle of water from the fridge. "Home sweet home," he said, grinning. "Babe, check out this view." But May lingered at the entrance. Her fingers brushed the frame of the doorway. It was cold, despite the warm air, and her foot caught slightly on the threshold, not a stumble, but like the floor pulled a little before releasing her. Inside the apartment was pristine, white walls, light wood flooring, a spacious kitchen. But the scent caught her attention first. It wasn't detergent or paint or dust. It was sandalwood, faint, lingering, the kind used in temples or funerals. Not aggressive, not burnt, just enough to be noticed when the air moved. "Do you smell that?" she asked, setting her bag down. Arun sniffed. "The soap, I think. The cleaner used a lot." She didn't correct him. The first night, they unpacked only the essentials: kitchenware, clothes, bed sheets. May set up her vanity table in the corner of the bedroom, directly facing the mirror. The mirror was new, untouched, yet when she wiped it down, she noticed a fingerprint already there. Long, thin, not hers. She showed Arun, who shrugged. Probably the cleaners. Don't freak yourself out on night 1. She didn't reply. That night, she placed a small bowl of water on her nightstand, a habit from her grandmother, who believed it soothed restless spirits. Arun teased her about it, called her superstitious, but kissed her goodnight anyway. The second night, she had a dream. She was standing in the hallway of the apartment, staring at the closed bedroom door from outside. But in the dream, she wasn't her. She was someone else. Shorter, lighter, breathing rapidly. In the dream, her hand reached out to knock, but stopped mid-air. Her palm was trembling. And inside the room, someone was crying. Not loud sobbing, not childlike whimpering, just soft, relentless weeping, like grief that had no more energy left to explain itself. When May woke up, the bowl of water was shattered on the floor. Water seeped under the dresser. No glass nearby. The bowl was broken, cleanly split in half, like something had gripped it tightly from both sides and crushed it inward. Arun assumed she'd knocked it over in her sleep. "You probably sat up too fast," he said, already late for work. "It's fine, we'll grab a new one." But she hadn't moved all night, and she could still feel the tears from her dream. Not hers, but someone else's. That afternoon, while alone, she wandered the apartment with no real reason. The kitchen felt normal, the bathroom sterile, but the living room, the left corner near the shoe rack, gave her pause. A strange spot, warmer than the rest, and when she stood there, her skin prickled. Then she noticed it. The wall socket beside the shoe rack was upside down, installed incorrectly. She reached out to touch it and paused. A faint outline, like something had been taped over that area long ago, still marked the wall in a perfect square. Later that night, they went to bed early. Arun was out cold by 10. May stayed up. She scrolled her phone, trying to ignore the humming sound from the hallway. A low, irregular tone, almost like chanting, but distant, like it came from behind the drywall. She held her breath. It stopped. She set her phone down. The clock read 3:33 a.m. And then her phone vibrated. One missed call. No number, just the word unknown. One voicemail. She hesitated, pressed play. Nothing at first. Static. Then a faint, labored inhale, and then a whisper. "Don't let them. It hurts. I can't breathe." May sat frozen. The voice was soft, female, and oddly sounded close. Not like it was recorded in a faraway place. It sounded like it had been recorded inside the room. She checked the call log again. Still unknown. No duration, no timestamp. She looked at Arun, who hadn't stirred. Then she walked back to the spot near the shoe rack, the warm corner. Her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Same number, but this time she didn't play it. She simply turned to the door of the apartment, still locked, still sealed, but for the first time she wasn't sure they were the only ones with a key. The second voicemail arrived the next night. Same time, 3:33 a.m. Same number, unknown. This time, May didn't play it right away. She stared at the phone screen as it vibrated gently on the nightstand, the screen pulsing like a quiet warning. She could hear Arun's breathing beside her, deep, even, completely unaware of the weight pressing into the room like invisible hands on her shoulders. She didn't know why she reached for her earbuds. Maybe to separate herself from the sound. Maybe to make it less real. She slid one into her right ear and tapped play. The message began with nothing, just silence that stretched too long to be empty. Then static.
Then a whisper, so close it sounded like someone was speaking directly into her skull from the inside. Not again. Please, not again. The light went off. It's so dark in here. There was breathing after that, ragged like panic held just beneath the surface. Then a long exhale. The message cut out abruptly before the full breath ended. She yanked the earbud out and dropped the phone on the bed. Her chest was tight, her fingers were trembling. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Arun noticed the bags under her eyes but said nothing. He was the kind of man who believed most problems went away if you ignored them long enough or buried them under breakfast and laughter. May wasn't so sure anymore. Later that day, while Arun was out, May searched the voicemail app. The number wasn't logged in any traditional way. No call history, no voicemail duration, no metadata at all. It was as if the phone had made the call to itself. She scrolled back through her recent calls and froze. The number hadn't just called her. It had called her every night since they moved in, always at 3:33 a.m. She had never noticed before because she had been asleep. Only the latest two had left voicemails. She tried to play one from the previous nights, but each of them had vanished. Corrupted files, error messages, no audio. Only the timestamps remained, like empty graves. That night, she deleted the message. Not just deleted, she held the trash icon and confirmed the permanent deletion. Gone. She even cleared her call logs and turned her phone off before bed. But at exactly 3:33 a.m. the next night, she woke up anyway. The air was thick again, not humid, not warm, but full. She sat up in bed and turned the phone back on. It lit up before it had finished booting. One new voicemail. Unknown. She stared at it for a long time, then slowly pressed play. It began with the faint sound of something wet dripping onto concrete. Then the same voice, softer now, almost gentle. There are no windows. I waited. You left me here again. Then came a sound that made May recoil, a single sharp knock, not from the message, from the closet, inside the apartment. She froze. There it was again. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks, deliberate, measured, from inside the bedroom closet. Arun stirred beside her but didn't wake. She climbed out of bed quietly, her bare feet soft against the wood floor. The knocks didn't continue. She opened the closet door slowly. Empty. Nothing moved. But the air inside smelled different, earthy, like soil and incense. Not freshly burned, but faded like something once sacred left to rot. She reached for the flashlight app and shone it into the closet corners. The walls were clean. But near the back she noticed something strange, a crack in the wood paneling, too straight to be damage, too narrow to be a design. She reached toward it and felt cold air leaking from behind it. The closet wall wasn't solid. There was space behind it. She didn't tell Arun yet. Instead, she left the closet door open all night. And the next morning, she downloaded a sound editor app and loaded the voicemail into it. She increased the gain, ran a spectral analysis, tried to isolate the background sounds. The voice was clearer now. You know this place. You saw me in the mirror. You turned the light off. And then, a new sound in the background. A tiny jingle. Metal. Keys. She paused the audio and played that part again and again. The sound of keys dropping onto ceramic tile, exactly like the tiles in their apartment. The message wasn't recorded somewhere else. It had been recorded in 6B. At some point in time, past or future. May began to notice other things that day. The cat downstairs wouldn't go near their door. It stopped midway up the stairs and hissed at their entrance. The elevator opened to the 6th floor without being called twice that week. And when she stepped inside the elevator on Wednesday, the floor buttons flickered, as if one of them had been pressed, floor 6, despite her living there. She asked the receptionist about it casually. "Has the building had any issues with the elevators?" The woman behind the desk looked up slowly and then glanced at the wall clock, as if unsure how to answer. "Sometimes they're sensitive," she said. "Or maybe it's just old wiring. The top floors weren't part of the original plan. They added them later, during a renovation." She blinked. Renovation? She went home and searched the building's registration. Indeed, floor 6 and 7 were part of a new vertical extension added 2 years after the original structure was completed. That explained the strange layout, the slightly off symmetry in the hallway, why some apartments seemed too quiet, like theirs. That evening, she opened the crack in the closet a little more, using a butter knife to pry it open. It popped open with a breath of cold air. Inside was nothing but an empty space about 2 feet wide that extended across the wall. She reached in and found dust and something else, a plastic hairpin, old, red, cracked down the center. She washed her hands 3 times after touching it. The next night, she placed the hairpin on the vanity table in front of the mirror, just to see. At 3:33 a.m., she woke up again without the alarm. The phone had another voicemail, but this time it wasn't from unknown, it was from her own number. And when she played it, she heard herself sobbing, whispering, begging, "Please help me. Don't let them seal it again. It's still in the wall." She didn't recognize her own voice, but she knew it was hers. Not a recording, not a playback. Something else, something future, something spiraling inward. She deleted the message immediately and turned on all the lights in the apartment. Arun woke up groggy, confused. He told her she had a bad dream. He said nothing and went back to sleep. But the light stayed on until dawn, and in the faint hum of the apartment, she could still hear the echo of her voice playing back softly from the phone, even though it had been erased. May no longer needed an alarm. Her body now knew the time. Every night, her eyes opened at exactly 3:33 a.m. Even when she went to bed late, even when she took sleep aids, even when she told herself it was just stress, her body remembered what her mind wanted to forget. The phone never rang aloud anymore. The voicemails simply appeared, silently, waiting. Arun remained oblivious. He slept through the disturbances, blamed May's sleeplessness on moving stress, on hormonal shifts, on overthinking. He still kissed her forehead each morning with sleepy affection, but his kisses no longer calmed her. They felt distant, like they were being given to someone who was slowly becoming a stranger. May began documenting everything. She recorded the voicemails. She noted the timestamps. She began drawing the symbols she found hidden around the apartment, etched faintly into the wood, behind light switch covers, beneath the kitchen sink. She even started keeping a journal beside the bed. But by the 5th night, the writing inside wasn't always hers. On Thursday morning, she flipped to a new page and found a single sentence scrawled in thin, tight loops of handwriting that didn't belong to her. "They made me quiet, so you could live loud." She stared at the words for nearly 10 minutes, then tore the page out, burned it over the kitchen sink, and flushed the ashes. But the scent of sandalwood returned that night anyway, only stronger and sharper, like it had just been lit somewhere nearby. She followed it down the hallway, barefoot, robe drawn tight around her shoulders. The scent led her to the wall between the bedroom and the living room, the same warm patch she'd noticed days before near the shoe rack. It pulsed with heat now, even though the AC was running. She pressed her palm flat against the wall and heard her name. Not shouted, not whispered, just spoken, as if someone were standing inside the wall and placing their mouth directly to the drywall. May. She yanked her hand back and stumbled. For a long moment, the apartment felt hollow. Not in a sad way, in an architectural way. As if 6B was only a facade, a thin shell over something older, deeper, buried. The next day, she went downstairs and tried to speak with the cleaning staff. Most avoided eye contact. One old woman with a crooked back and a slow broom finally paused and said in a hoarse voice, "You're in 6B, aren't you?" May nodded. The woman stopped sweeping. Her hand clutched the broom handle until her knuckles whitened. "That one should have stayed closed. Too soon. Too soon." When May asked what that meant, the woman simply shook her head and walked away. Back in the apartment, May turned her attention to the built-in cabinetry. There were strange inconsistencies, screws that didn't match, wood that looked newer in some panels than others, a faint seam along the back of the cupboard that suggested it had been opened and resealed. She pried at the back panel with a spoon. The wood gave way more easily than it should have. Behind it, tucked in the narrow cavity between the wall and the paneling, was something wrapped in aged cloth. She unwrapped it slowly. A handful of items spilled onto the floor. A dried flower garland, a faded photograph of a woman standing in front of a building entrance, this building, but the floor number above the door was blurred, and a small cloth pouch filled with rice, ash, and fingernail clippings. She dropped it instantly and backed away. She recognized it. A ritual binding pouch, something used to suppress wandering spirits, to silence voices, to seal things inside a space, not for protection, but for containment. She burned the items in the kitchen sink that night. Ashes curled and blackened the steel basin. The apartment smelled of burnt offerings for hours, but nothing felt cleansed. The next voicemail came at 3:33 a.m. It was longer this time, over 2 minutes. She didn't remember hitting play. She simply found herself sitting in the living room, the phone on her lap, the message already half over. The voice was no longer crying. It was speaking. May listened with widening eyes and a numb face. The woman on the other end described the placement of furniture. "Your red shoes are in the corner, the ones with the scuff. I left something under the right side." May turned her head. The red shoes were exactly where the voice had said. She crawled to them, reached beneath the right sole, and found a small slip of cloth folded into a square. It was black, and when she unfolded it, a rust-colored stain bloomed across the fabric. Not fresh, but not old either. She turned the voicemail off and sat in the silence. For the first time, it wasn't the words that haunted her. It was the tone. The woman sounded like she was still there, not just as a memory, not as a ghost in the traditional sense, but present, watching, listening, and repeating, as if the apartment itself had been recording her from the moment she entered, as if the walls could mimic,
The floor could echo. The space could learn. Later that morning, May tested the theory. She whispered a phrase aloud near the shoe rack while holding her phone. "I don't know who you are, but I hear you. I believe you." Then she turned the phone off, waited, did nothing more. That night, the voicemail came again. Only this time, it began with her own voice, saying those exact words. "I don't know who you are, but I hear you. I believe you." Then the woman responded, "I waited so long for someone like you. They made me be quiet. They put me in the wall. But I was still listening, always listening." May sat frozen. It wasn't a playback. It was a conversation. Across time, across boundaries, across the veil. The walls were not just haunted. They were responsive. She began to speak to them more often during the day, in quiet tones, and they began to answer, not through knocks, not through dreams, but through the phone. The line between her voice and the woman's voice began to blur. Sometimes she would hear herself saying things she had never spoken. Other times she would forget what she had actually said. Reality became slippery, like water over glass. Arun noticed her change in her eyes first. "You've been somewhere else lately," he said. "Somewhere far away." She smiled at him, but said nothing. How could she explain it? That she no longer lived entirely in one place, that her thoughts were now shared, that her mind was beginning to split, one part in the present, and one part trapped somewhere deeper, behind the drywall, behind the mirror, behind the thin seam of wood that held someone else's memory. May stood at the wall one night and placed her entire body against it, chest to surface, forehead to cool plaster, and listened. Just as she began to drift, a voice came through, not from the phone, not from a speaker, but from inside the wall itself. Not her name this time, but a number, a date, a floor that did not exist in the current building plans. May pulled back slowly and whispered, "What do you want from me?" The answer came in a single breath. "Let me be heard."
The scent changed on the fourth day. It was no longer sandalwood. It was older, earthier, like fermented wood, cracked bone, and something damp buried beneath the tiles. May noticed it first in the kitchen, then near the bathroom, then, finally, near the base of the vanity table. It wasn't coming from outside, and it wasn't in the pipes. It was coming from within the apartment itself. Not a leak, not rot, but something deliberately placed. She followed the scent like a trail, low to the ground, crawling along the edges of the skirting boards with a flashlight in one hand and her other hand brushing along the walls. That's when she found it, a folded square of muslin cloth, dry and dark, wedged behind the radiator in the hallway. She unfolded it slowly. Inside were a handful of old rice grains, blackened at the tips, as well as what looked like dried petals and 3 tiny red threads tied in a knot. A ritual packet, an offering, but one that had long since expired. Its energy felt drained, bitter, not sacred. She found a second packet the next day, behind the bathroom cabinet, then a third, stuffed into the hollow underneath the sink, each one slightly different, each one carefully hidden, none of them recent. She began to suspect these were not placed by accident. They were not forgotten. They had been meant to remain hidden, not to bless the space, but to hold something down. By the sixth packet, May stopped touching them with her bare hands. She wrapped each one in a plastic bag and stored them in a shoebox in the hallway closet. She didn't dare to throw them out, not yet. Instead, she went to the small shrine on the street near the alley where the monks still chanted each morning. She stood before the incense and waited until one of the older monks took notice. She didn't mention ghosts. She didn't say the word haunting. Instead, she simply said, "I think something is asking to be remembered," but no one ever answered. The monk did not ask for more. He simply gestured for her to kneel. He poured her a small cup of salt water, lit a long incense stick, and whispered something into her left ear. It was a prayer, but not one she had ever heard before. A prayer for spirits who had lost their names, a chant for those who died with no witness. Before she left, the monk placed a piece of chalk in her hand. "Draw the door," he said softly, "even if it's not real, even if it's not yours." Back home, she obeyed. She waited until nightfall, turned off every light, and sat near the warmest patch of wall, the place behind the shoe rack, the place where the air seemed to pulse like a second heartbeat. She drew a rectangle on the wall in chalk, a simple door. Then a smaller symbol in the center, a spiral, within a circle, within a square. She didn't know what it meant. She had seen it before, on one of the packets she found hidden. When the door was complete, she placed one of the ritual packets at the base and waited. The room was silent for a long time. Even the air felt held. Then, slowly, the wall began to sweat. Tiny beads of moisture gathered along the chalk lines. The symbol pulsed once, then again, then faded. When she looked again in the morning, the chalk was gone. The packet had turned to dust. That day, the voicemail didn't arrive. No call, no message, just silence. For a moment, May felt peace. Then the dreams returned. She saw herself standing in a hallway she had never walked, lit with red bulbs, flickering, old. The floor was tiled in black and white, but every few tiles were cracked, stained. She looked down at her feet in the dream and saw they were bare, dirty. She held a tray in her hands, filled with fruit, incense, and a small ceramic doll. She turned a corner and came to a door without a handle. It looked like the wall had grown over it, as if the door once existed, but the building decided to erase it. She placed the offering at its base, and as she turned to leave, she heard it. A whisper, not in her language, not even fully human. A breath given shape. "Help me remember." She woke up crying, not sobbing, not scared, but grieving. She didn't understand why. She spent the next day trying to trace the floor layout of the apartment. She drew the shape of their unit, the way the rooms fit together, but something didn't match. The dimensions were wrong. The hallway wall was too thick for a regular structure, as if there was space behind it, wasted space, or forgotten space. She emailed the property management company asking for the original floor plans. They ignored her. When she asked the receptionist in the lobby, the woman froze. "What do you mean, original?" she said. "We don't give those out." May pressed gently. "Has the layout changed over the years?" The receptionist hesitated, then quietly said, "There was an incident years ago before they renovated, before they changed the name of the building. Unit 6B used to be something else." "What do you mean?" "It wasn't an apartment, not in the old plans. It was storage, or maybe a shrine, I don't know, but there was no Unit 6B listed until 3 years ago. May thanked her and left. That night, she didn't sleep at all. She lit 3 incense sticks and sat in the hallway with the shoebox of ritual packets beside her. One by one, she took them out, unwrapped them, placed them in a circle around her. The air grew thick, tight, sour. She didn't chant, she didn't pray. She just listened, and from behind the walls, the softest sound began to rise. Not words, but weeping, as if someone behind the plaster was finally remembering how to cry. And as she sat there, still and silent, the voicemail came in. This time, the voice was closer, clearer. No static, no distance. You found my offerings. You heard my name, even if I didn't say it, even if they took it from me. Thank you. Then, silence. For the first time since they moved in, May fell asleep before dawn, and for the first time in days, the walls did not whisper.
May couldn't let it go. Not now. Not after the offerings. Not after the voice thanked her. Not after the wall cried. There was something unfinished here, something hidden under drywall and decades of silence. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone had once lived in this apartment, someone who was never supposed to be remembered, someone erased. She spent hours on old forums, scouring property records, trying to find anything about the original building name. She finally found a single thread on a local message board, archived, mostly dead. It mentioned an old structure on the same plot of land before the current high-rise existed, a smaller building, 6 floors, no elevator. The photo was grainy, but in it, she saw the same exterior shape, same frame, same iron gate at the entrance. The original building was called Chansiri Residences. There were no available floor plans online, but someone in the thread had replied with a vague rumor. Unit 6B, that was the one with the girl who disappeared, right? May's heart skipped. She created an account just to reply, but the thread was from over 6 years ago, inactive, dead space. Still, she searched for Chansiri Residences in news archives, and that's when she found it. One article, no photo, no follow-up. Headline: Missing woman case closed after no evidence found in Chansiri complex. The article was short, vague, said a woman in her early 30s had stopped showing up to work, had no family, no formal missing person case filed, only concerned neighbors who reported the smell. Police broke in, found nothing but an empty apartment. No signs of struggle, no body, just a single sandal left by the bathroom door. The article didn't list her name, only referred to her as Ms. N. May read it again and again. Ms. N. Nok, Nuan, Natsuko, Ning. So many names lost in abbreviation. She looked again at the faded photo she'd found in the offering packet. The woman standing in front of the old building, expressionless, eyes hollow, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Something about the photo made May's stomach tighten. The face was familiar, not in a photographic way, in a mirror kind of way. She stared at the face for so long that it began to warp in her vision. Soft jaw, wide eyes, hair that might once have been long, now burned into gray memory. That night, she held the photo up to the mirror in the hallway, not her bedroom mirror, the small one hanging crooked beside the shoe rack. When she aligned the image with the reflection, she noticed something she hadn't before. The mirror wasn't perfectly flat. Its surface bulged slightly near the bottom edge, a warping in the glass. She leaned closer, and for a fraction of a second, she saw something behind her that wasn't there. A shadow. A woman, standing at the end of the hallway. But when she turned, nothing. No one. Only the faint smell of jasmine and dust. She slept uneasily that night and woke to a new voicemail. No static, no background, just a whisper. "You found me. You saw me. Please, don't stop." Later that morning, May went downstairs to the mailboxes, pretended to fumble with her keys, and waited for someone, anyone old enough to have lived here during the previous era. It took 3 days. Then finally, she saw her. A stooped woman with white hair, holding a blue plastic bag, shuffling toward the elevator. May approached gently. "I'm sorry, but have you lived here long?" The woman squinted. "Too long," she said. "Too many names, too many faces." May asked about the woman who vanished, the one from Unit 6B. The woman went still, then looked around as if checking for who might be listening. She nodded once. "She was quiet, that one. Always alone. She had a little shrine in her unit, I think. Didn't like visitors." May asked what happened. The old woman shook her head. One day she just stopped being there. No sounds, no lights. The building manager checked on her and she was gone. No bags packed, no shoes taken, just her left sandal near the bathroom door. They said she must have moved out, but she didn't tell anyone. May asked if the police searched the place. They did. Didn't find anything. They said maybe she left quietly, went back to the province. But the woman's eyes said otherwise. May waited, then asked the question she had been fearing the answer to. "Do you remember her name?" The old woman was quiet for a long time, then whispered it like a sin. "Knock." May felt her breath catch in her throat. She thanked her, returned upstairs, and sat in silence on the floor of 6B. The same floor where Knock had walked, prayed, eaten, vanished. The air in the room felt different now. Not evil, not cursed, just heavy, like someone had been waiting a long time to be acknowledged. She wrote the name down in her journal, Knock, then wrote it again and again, until it filled the page. That night, she whispered it aloud into the silence, once, then again, then 3 times. The voicemail arrived at 3:33 a.m. It didn't say anything. It only played a sound, the sound of someone exhaling deeply. A breath let go, relieved, mournful, real. May fell asleep on the floor. When she woke, the shoebox in the closet was open, the packets were gone, and written on the inside of the lid, in the same tight handwriting as before, was a single line. "You said my name. Now I remember yours." The mirror had been waiting. Not the vanity mirror, not the one in the bathroom, the one by the door. The small rectangular mirror near the shoe rack. Its surface no longer reflected the room correctly. Its edges warped in subtle waves. Its depth too deep. May couldn't walk past it anymore without glancing, noticing, feeling. The glass seemed to breathe. She remembered what the monk said, "Draw the door, even if it isn't yours." She had drawn one on the wall. But what if the real door was not in the wall, not behind drywall or hidden in blueprints? What if the door was a mirror? She started researching rituals that used mirrors as gateways. Old ones, obscure ones, the kind buried in obscure Thai forums, Japanese spirit boards, and Taiwanese ghost threads. They all said the same thing: never look into a mirror at 3:33 a.m. Never with candlelight, never alone, never with your real name in your mouth. She read of something older, the midnight gaze ritual. Not many dared try it. Even fewer spoke of what happened after. It required 4 items: a black cloth, a bowl of salt water, an offering of red string, and the mirror, uncleaned, untouched, for 7 days. She had all of them. She didn't tell Arun. He was distant lately, detached. He didn't notice her waking at odd hours, didn't hear the voicemails, didn't sense the way the walls now pulsed with presence. That night, she waited in silence. At 3 a.m., she laid out the black cloth beneath the mirror, placed the saltwater bowl in front of it, tied a red thread around her finger, and lit a single stick of sandalwood incense beside the bowl. Then she knelt and waited. The flame flickered. The room held its breath. When the clock struck 3:33 a.m., she opened her eyes and looked into the mirror. Nothing at first, just her reflection, dim, flickering. Then something moved. Not in the mirror, behind her, but only in the mirror. A shape, a woman. Long black hair soaked and tangled, head tilted slightly, lips unmoving, eyes that didn't blink. She stood behind May, silent. May didn't turn around. She knew the rules: never turn around. Instead, she whispered the name, "Knock." The figure in the mirror reacted, not with speech, but with vibration. The glass trembled. The incense snapped in half without being touched. Then the reflection changed. Now the woman in the mirror was May, but not her current self. It was May, drenched, shaking, eyes wide in terror. She was trying to speak, but her lips were sewn shut. Blood trickled from the corners of her mouth. May tried to look away, but the mirror held her. Her voice began to echo without her speaking. "Please help me. Please help me. Please help me." Then silence. And then a scream. Not from the mirror, not from the room, but from her phone. It vibrated violently on the floor. She picked it up. One voicemail. The screen said, "From May." She pressed play with numb fingers. It was her voice, screaming, raw, ragged, panicked, screaming words she didn't remember saying. "He's inside. He's inside the mirror. Don't let him out. Don't let him out. Don't let him out." The sound cut, and then was replaced by slow, rhythmic breathing. Then a new voice. Not hers, not Knox. A male voice, low, wet, almost amused. "You opened it. You looked too long. She was never alone." The message ended. The mirror cracked. Not shattered, just a single split right down the middle, like a wound opening. May didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply sat there until sunrise. And when the light entered the room, the crack was gone. But the reflection had changed. Her own eyes now carried something else behind them, a second gaze, lingering, watching with her, through her. Later that morning, Arun commented on her expression. "You look different today.
She said nothing. Inside, she felt colder. Not frightened, not broken, just less alone. The phone no longer waited for 3:33 a.m. It began to buzz at random hours, midday, sunset, moments of silence. Each time the same voice, each time more sure of itself. She speaks through you now. She remembers what it felt like to be sealed, to be forgotten, to scream into silence. May began to forget where her own voice ended. She stopped answering Arun when he called her name. She often stared at the mirror for minutes, watching for the flicker. It always came, eventually. And when it did, the figure wasn't behind her anymore. It was beside her. Closer.
The wall was no longer just warm. It pulsed. May could feel it when she walked by, the faint tremor beneath the paint, like something inside was stirring, breathing, listening, waiting. It started with the smell. Not incense this time, not jasmine, but iron, the sharp, unmistakable scent of old blood, rusty, stale, beep. She first noticed it near the shoe rack again, then by the hallway closet, and finally in the bedroom, just beneath the corner window. There were no stains, no leaks, nothing the eye could catch, but she could feel it. It clung to her clothes, her hair, the air. She tried to tell Arun. He dismissed it as stress, too much time alone, too many horror articles online. He offered to take her away for a weekend, but she couldn't leave, not yet. Something in the apartment had opened. She needed to know what. So she waited until he was gone for the night, an overnight shift he couldn't get out of, and brought the tools she needed. A hammer, a flashlight, salt, and a bowl of clean water. She approached the closet. It was the same closet where she had once pulled out the old packets, the same one that had hidden the muslin bundles and dried rice. She pushed aside the coats, moved the shelf, found the faint line she'd noticed days before, an uneven seam along the back wall. With a single sharp tap, the panel gave way. It wasn't loud, it didn't crack dramatically. It simply popped inward, revealing a narrow space behind it. She slipped through, crouching low. The air inside was cold, still, and thick. It smelled like old prayer halls, forgotten graves. She flicked on the flashlight. The beam caught something immediately. Marks on the wall, symbols drawn in charcoal or ash, smudged from age, but still clear. Circles with lines, triangles wrapped in red thread, eyes drawn with no pupils. She moved deeper in. The space wasn't large, but it had been used frequently. There were candles melted into puddles, charcoal sticks, a cracked bowl filled with salt, dried herbs, and a small wooden platform like an altar, built into the wall, hidden behind the drywall for who knows how long. But it was what lay beneath it that made May freeze. Blood. Old, dried, dark brown, pooled around the base of the altar and soaked into the fabric that lined the floor. She didn't scream, didn't run. She simply knelt, touched the fabric, felt the dried stiffness beneath her fingers. Then something moved in the darkness. Not loud, not fast, just a soft shift, a dragging sound. She turned the light slowly. It illuminated a bundle in the corner, covered in cloth, tightly wrapped, humanoid in shape. She knew what it was before she touched it, knew what it meant, but still she crawled closer, hands shaking,
breath short. She reached out, lifted the edge of the cloth, and saw the remains of a mouth sewn shut. Dried flesh, thin lips pulled together with black thread, eyes missing, hair long and clotted with blood. May backed away slowly, heart hammering. The cloth dropped, but the sound it made as it fell wasn't soft. It was heavy, final. The moment it touched the floor again, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't want to check, but she did. One voicemail, from unknown. She tapped play. The voice was hers, but older, cracked. He's still in here. They never removed him. They just sealed me with him, and I couldn't scream. May looked back at the body, at the sewn mouth, at the altar. She saw something else now. A second set of symbols hidden behind the bones, symbols of containment. This wasn't a shrine, it was a prison. A ritual cell meant to hold not just a ghost, but a spirit parasite, something that had once possessed, once used, once broken someone. Nock had not been buried here. She had been sealed with something else, sacrificed, a vessel turned jail. May stepped backward, her foot knocked over a bowl. It clattered loudly. The sound echoed, but not inside the space. It echoed through the walls, as if the walls themselves had hollow bones. Suddenly, the apartment groaned, a deep, shifting creak, like wood under weight, like plaster expanding. And her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, already playing itself. She couldn't stop it. The voice wasn't Nock's, wasn't hers. It was something else entirely. Male, wet, low. You broke the thread. You opened the door. She screamed too long. Now I speak. The message cut. The altar snapped down the middle, split into two like dry wood under fire. The floor beneath it was now cracked, leaking something thick and black. May scrambled out of the hidden space, closed the panel, shoved furniture in front of it. But the smell followed her. That night, Arun came home to find her curled in the corner of the living room, rocking, murmuring. He tried to hold her, tried to ask what happened. But when he looked up at him, her eyes were not entirely hers, and behind her, on the freshly painted wall, was a new crack, shaped like a mouth, stitched closed. The apartment began to echo, not with sound, with silence, a silence that had shape, weight, and movement. It filled corners, hung over mirrors, and slid across the floor when the lights were off. Even during the day, 6B no longer felt bright. The sunlight that used to spill through the windows stopped halfway into the room, as if the air itself refused to carry it any further. May barely slept anymore. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. A woman kneeling in the dark, head bowed, lips sewn shut, blood drying around the threads. Each time the woman's body shook violently, trying to scream, but no sound came out. And when she looked up, her eyes were May's eyes. The nightmares bled into the days. Arun noticed first. May didn't hum while cooking anymore. She didn't speak much at all. Sometimes he would find her standing in front of the closet, not moving, not blinking. When he called her name, she would turn, smile faintly, and ask, "Did you hear it too?" He never did. That week, the neighbors started complaining. Someone, they said, was crying through the walls. Not wailing, not shouting, just a low, constant sobbing that came from inside the plaster. Maintenance checked every apartment on the 6th floor. They found nothing. But that night,
The building's security guard quit. He left his post before dawn, trembling, saying he'd heard a woman whispering in the elevator. She was standing in the corner, wearing a hospital gown, head tilted to one side. When he looked again, she was gone. But the elevator's security camera kept flickering, frame after frame of her standing there, visible only in the reflections. Arun tried to make sense of it all. He wanted logic, reason, control. He wanted his wife back. But May was drifting further into the dark. She began to record herself sleeping. Every night she set her phone on the nightstand and hit record. On the third night, she found something. It started normally. Her breathing, the faint hum of the city outside, distant traffic. Then came the whisper. Not words, just a rhythm. 3 syllables repeated over and over. When she slowed the audio down, she realized what it was. Her name, spoken backward. The next morning she woke to find the mirror by the shoe rack completely black. Not broken, not covered, but dark, like someone had poured ink across the glass. She reached out and felt it. It was cold. And when her hand touched the surface, the reflection blinked. Not her, the reflection. May stumbled back, falling onto the floor, gasping for air. Then came the phone call. Arun wasn't home. The screen said, unknown, but when she answered, she didn't hear static this time. She heard her own voice, whispering, pleading. He's still here. He's using my face. The line cut. The mirror cleared. And May realized her reflection wasn't moving in sync anymore. It smiled a fraction too late. Its eyes didn't quite look the same. There was awareness in them, something curious, something hungry. That night, Arun returned home early. He found May sleeping on the floor beside the mirror, phone still in her hand. He carried her to bed, whispering softly, "You need help." She didn't wake, but as he turned off the light, her lips moved faintly, whispering something under her breath. He leaned closer and froze. She was repeating his full name over and over, like a chant. He shook her awake, terrified. She blinked, confused, not remembering a thing. The next day, Arun went to the building manager, demanding answers. He wanted to know about the old structure, the renovations, the missing woman. The manager tried to stay calm, but his hands were shaking. He said there had been an incident years ago. A tenant, a woman, performed a ritual that went wrong. They said she had invited something in, something that couldn't leave. She disappeared, and the building was rebuilt over her unit. The records were wiped, the number changed. But he looked at Arun then, his voice low. "Your apartment shouldn't exist. It was sealed for a reason." Arun rushed home, heart pounding, praying May hadn't done anything worse. But she had. He found her kneeling in front of the mirror again, the incense lit, the salt bowl spilled, the red thread around her finger, her reflection not mirroring her anymore. He shouted her name, grabbed her shoulders. She didn't react. Her eyes were rolled up, white, her lips moving in soundless rhythm. The mirror rippled like water. Then a sound came through it, soft at first, then louder. A scream, but not from May, from inside the glass. It was the sound of a woman screaming without a mouth, an endless voiceless shriek that filled the air and vibrated through the floor. Arun smashed the mirror with his fist. Glass shattered, scattering across the tiles. But the scream didn't stop. It burst out of the mirror like air escaping from a sealed chamber, a soundless blast that knocked him backward. When it stopped, the apartment went still. The mirror was gone, the frame empty, the glass reduced to dust. May was motionless. He called her name again, no answer. Then she exhaled, a deep, heavy, guttural breath. Her eyes opened, and for a moment they weren't her eyes. They were two different colors, one dark brown, one pitch black, and behind them, someone else was looking through. There were things that should never be sealed without ceremony. There were bodies that should never be buried without a name. There were souls that should never be left behind. May knew this now, but she had learned it too late. For days, she barely spoke. She sat near the broken frame of the mirror, hands folded in her lap, staring into nothing. When Arun tried to speak with her, she smiled softly, politely, as though she didn't understand the question, as though she wasn't entirely May anymore. He brought incense, he brought monks. He even hired a spiritual practitioner from the countryside, an old man with cloudy eyes and palms stained by soot and herbs. The man didn't step inside 6B. He stood at the threshold for a long time, head tilted, eyes closed. Then he whispered, "You opened something. You brought her forward, but something else came through." Arun tried to explain, "We didn't invite anything. We didn't summon. We just moved in." The man shook his head. "You inherited it. When a spirit is forgotten, it anchors. When no one speaks its name, it buries itself in the walls." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin bundle of sticks wrapped in red thread. If she called to you, it means she was still half trapped, still waiting for her rights. No burning, no bell, no water, no last breath. The apartment didn't forget her, but the world did, and that is worse than death. He performed a brief chant at the door, sprinkled salt water along the frame, lit a stick of incense, and whispered May's name. Inside, May screamed, not a normal scream, a scream that tore her throat raw, echoing off the walls like a chorus of voices, all shrieking through the same mouth. She collapsed, convulsing, hands clawing at her own face. When Arun rushed in, she looked at him and whispered, "They never finished it. They sealed me alive. I wasn't the one. It was him." That night, Arun demanded answers from the property office again. He threatened police. He threatened press. The manager relented. He handed over an old folder, yellowed, half-shredded, hidden beneath boxes in the back room. Inside were the original blueprints of Chansiri residences. Unit 6B didn't exist, but there was a room 6N, a private chamber once used by the building's former owner, a known occultist. The room had no bathroom, no windows, no power outlets, just 4 walls, and a locked, sealed cabinet built into the far end. The notes described it as a containment room, marked for ritual purposes, never opened after its last use. And the name listed at the bottom of the final incident report? Noak, spiritual medium. Status, unresponsive. Remains, not located. Arun returned home in silence. He didn't speak to May, didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just stood in the hallway, staring at the wall. Then he pressed his ear against it, and he heard humming, a lullaby, sung in a language he didn't recognize, soft, feminine, off-key. He backed away slowly. The wall breathed. That night, May spoke for the first time in days. She said clearly, "You can't send her away, not without finishing what they never did." She walked to the closet, opened the panel again, and entered the narrow chamber.
Arun followed her, flashlight trembling in his hand. The altar was still cracked, the bones still scattered, but now something had been added. A small bowl, salt water, a folded cloth, and a photo of May, placed carefully at the center. He asked who had done it. May looked up. Her voice echoed with something ancient. She did. She wants to leave, but the rites were never performed. They burned the wrong things. They whispered the wrong words. They sealed him inside and let her rot with him. Arun asked what he needed to do. May smiled and handed him a slip of paper. On it were 6 lines of text, scrawled in handwriting that wasn't hers, not entirely. They weren't prayers, not mantras, instructions for a final rite. Burn sandalwood, scatter salt at the 4 corners, ring a bell 7 times, speak her name, drop blood on the earth, break the mirror facing east. He performed it step by step, even when his hands trembled, even when May's body began to shudder behind him. The final part, breaking the mirror, was the hardest. There were no more mirrors in 6B, except one, hidden behind the altar, still covered in old red cloth, sealed in ash. He removed the cloth and saw her, Noke, face stitched, eyes full, mouth twitching in silent scream. He shattered it with a hammer. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was complete, total, sacred. May collapsed. Her eyes rolled back, a scream caught in her throat. Then her body went still. Arun rushed to her. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking, breathing. She looked at him, confused. "Where am I?" He cried into her neck, held her like he hadn't in weeks. Outside the chamber, the wall behind the shoe rack cracked and bled. A single stream, dark, thick, down to the floor, then stopped. A mouth finally allowed to scream, now silent, now heard. The silence didn't last. It never does. The rites had been performed, the mirror shattered, the altar broken, the blood had stopped running. But the haunting hadn't ended. It had evolved. May began to return to herself, piece by piece. Her eyes were steadier. Her voice no longer trembled. She remembered how to laugh, softly, cautiously, like someone remembering how to breathe. For a while, Arun believed it was over. The worst had passed. They could move on. But deep down, he knew. Some doors don't close cleanly. Some voices, once heard, never leave your head. It started again 3 days later. Only this time, it wasn't May who received the voicemail. It was Arun. The call came while he was in the elevator, alone, on his way up to the 6th floor. The screen read, "Unknown." He answered without thinking. No one spoke. But he could hear something, breathing. Then a low, broken whisper. "Don't let it repeat." The line cut. When he reached the apartment, May was asleep on the couch. Her face looked peaceful for the first time in weeks. He didn't wake her. Instead, he checked his voicemail. One new message. He played it and froze. It was his own voice, screaming, not yelling, not shouting, but screaming in pure, unfiltered panic. He heard the crash of glass, the sound of something breaking, and his voice, hoarse, cracking, desperate. Then silence. Then, faintly, May's voice. "He's not me." The message ended.
Arun sat in the dark for hours, trying to understand what he'd just heard, trying to convince himself it was a prank, a glitch, a fabrication. But deep down, he recognized the scream. It was his. Not a recording from the past, but something that hadn't happened yet. He didn't tell May. He watched her closely over the next few days. She was healing, recovering, trying to forget. But the phone calls didn't stop. Every night a new voicemail arrived, from unknown, always around 3:33 a.m. But now the messages weren't from the spirit. They were from the future. Clips of May's voice sobbing, Arun crying out, doors slamming, a child's laugh sharp and unnatural, echoing through the static. One night, he heard a recording of himself whispering, "I can't close it. It won't stop." The voicemails were warnings, but from who or what? One evening, May was making tea when she paused in the middle of pouring the water. She turned slowly, looking over her shoulder like someone had spoken her name. Arun asked what was wrong. She blinked, then whispered, "I had a dream. You weren't you." "What do you mean?" "You were standing at the edge of the bed. Your mouth was open, but your voice came from my phone." He tried to dismiss it, tried to reassure her, but the next morning she played him a new message. It began with static, then footsteps, then his voice, panicked. "Don't pick it up. Please, don't answer. If you do, he'll get out." Then a crash, glass shattering, the sound of someone choking, and then silence. They called the phone company, asked for call logs, but there were no incoming calls on record. The voicemails didn't exist in the cloud, only locally, as if they had been inserted into the device, like the phone had recorded what hadn't happened yet. Arun started sleeping with the light on. He kept a glass of salt water next to the bed. May tied red thread around her wrist again. They didn't talk about the messages anymore. There were too many, too fragmented, too real. One voicemail shook Arun more than the others. It began with May's voice, calm, measured, exhausted. "If you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I tried to hold it back. I tried to finish the right, but it wasn't just her." Then her voice cracked. "He needed a voice, and he took yours. Now you're just echo." The message ended with Arun's scream, distorted, stretched, too long. That night, Arun stared at himself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. He looked the same, but something in his reflection felt off, delayed, like it blinked just a little too late. He touched the mirror, cold. He whispered his own name, and his reflection smiled before he did. The building always had one floor too many. May realized this as she traced her fingers along the faded blueprints, the ones Arun had fought to obtain from the original construction office. They were incomplete, yellowed, curling at the corners, but they told the truth that the new management had buried. Unit 6B was never meant to be a home. It wasn't listed in the original floor plans. Instead, it was labeled in strange looping script, a name scribbled hastily and then scratched out. Ritual Containment Chamber. That's what it translated to, roughly. No plumbing, no windows, no walls connecting to the adjacent units. A sealed room, isolated, deliberate. May ran her hand over the paper, heart pounding. Who builds a sealed chamber in a residential building? Unless they needed to hold something. And suddenly everything made sense. The mirrored layout that never aligned, the way the walls felt too thick, the absence of echoes in some rooms, like sound never made it back to her. It hadn't been haunted by accident. It had been haunted on purpose. Arun flipped through another folder, documents older than either of them, written in formal bureaucratic tie. There had been a woman, employed by the previous building owner, a medium, trained, respected. Her job was to perform cleansing rites for properties that couldn't sell, places where deaths had occurred, where rumors spread, where darkness lingered. Her name was Nock. They brought her in to cleanse this place, but something went wrong. Instead of cleansing it, she absorbed it. Whatever had been here before the building, whatever was buried beneath the concrete, latched onto her. She tried to contain it, to isolate herself, to trap it in silence. She locked herself into the room, placed ritual threads along every wall, sealed every mirror, folded her own reflection into salt and ash. She became the prison. And when she died, they didn't bury her. They didn't burn her. They simply closed the door, renovated the unit, changed the number, sold it as a studio, and told no one. They thought the silence meant success. They thought wrong. She never moved out. Her soul bound to the rituals that failed, her body sealed behind drywall and closet panels, her voice leaking through frequencies, looking for someone to listen, someone to finish what she couldn't. May stood in the center of the living room, the blueprint crumpled in her fist. "This was never our home," she said softly. Arun looked at her, pale and shaken. "It's a cage," he whispered. And then the voicemail came in. But this time it wasn't from unknown. It came from Nock. 3 letters on the screen. N-O-K. The phone began vibrating violently, then stopped. May stared at it, then tapped play. The message was long, nearly 3 minutes. But there was no voice, only a sound. The scraping of fingernails against wood, the muffled sob of a mouth trying to scream through stitches, the shuffling of feet in a narrow room, and then the sound of something else breathing alongside her. Not human, not female, not Nock. Arun looked at her. "It's still here," he said. May nodded. She never moved out, and neither did he. They returned to the closet, opened the panel. This time, the space had changed. The altar was gone. The bones were gone. In their place was a chair, an old wooden chair with restraints bolted to the arms, and something written on the floor in what looked like dried blood. "Speak for me. Let me go. Let him stay." Arun stared at the writing. Who wrote that? May didn't answer. She stepped into the space, slowly, reverently. She knelt beside the chair, touched the restraint. Her fingers trembled. "She never moved out," she said, "because the thing that possessed her had nowhere else to go. And when she died, when the rites failed, she trapped both herself and the thing inside this room. Her voice, it wasn't always calling for help. Sometimes it was warning us." Arun felt the air change again. The walls flexed. The air grew humid. The scent of jasmine returned, sweet at first, then sickly. The phone buzzed again.
May picked it up. No voicemail, no number, just one notification. He's listening now. And in the reflection of the broken glass, they saw a shadow standing behind them. Not knock, taller, twisted, watching with a face that flickered through dozens of expressions. Grief, rage, glee, hunger. And its mouth moved, but no sound came out, because she had sewn it shut. She tried to protect them, tried to lock him away, but now they had listened too long. Now the echo was inside.
The night the door finally opened, the apartment went completely still. No wind, no traffic outside, no hum from the refrigerator, no ticking clock. Even breath felt suspended, caught in the throat of something waiting. It had started earlier in the day with the return of the markings. Thin black lines reappeared along the baseboards, faint like soot or ash smeared by invisible fingers. They formed circles again, broken loops sealed with symbols that throbbed with invisible heat. May traced one with her fingertip. It burned her. Not the heat of fire, the heat of memory. That night, she and Arun stood in the hallway together, neither speaking, both staring at the closet. Behind it waited the chamber, the bones, the truth. May spoke first, voice barely above a whisper. "It won't end unless we finish it." Arun nodded slowly. They gathered what they needed: sandalwood incense, a copper bowl of salted water, red thread, the old photo of Noak they had uncovered, and a hammer. At exactly 3:33 a.m., they opened the panel. The space behind the wall was different now, expanded, alive. The air shimmered faintly, as if something just behind it was breathing into their world. The altar had been rearranged, no longer broken, restored. And in the center of the floor was a ring of SIM cards, hundreds of them, arranged in perfect symmetry, each one scratched or burned with the same symbol carved into the plastic casing. "She was trying to reach someone," May whispered. "Through phones, through voicemail, through anything. It was never random. It was desperate. A language built from what the dead could still touch." May knelt beside the ring. Inside it lay a final offering, something new, a small recording device, old, worn, flashing red. She pressed play. Static. Then a woman's voice, weak, tired. "Noak. I tried to trap him. He had no voice. That was the only way. He needed mine. I sealed the mirrors. I broke the echo, but he waits in silence, and silence always returns." The message ended. Then the ground beneath the altar groaned. A seam cracked across the concrete, not wide, just enough to release a puff of dark air. Then a whisper, low, wet, hungry. Not Noak, the one she'd locked in here with her. May stood, trembling. "This is the last wall," she said. "We have to unseal it." They poured the salt water across the crack, lit the incense, bound their wrists with red thread. Arun read the final line of the chant Noak had written. Her name, spoken clearly, 3 times. Noak, Noak, Noak. The air bent, the wall cracked inward, and then the back of the chamber opened. Behind it wasn't more drywall. It wasn't brick or steel. It was a room made of shadow, a thin, flickering space built from the grief of everything left unfinished. Inside, a figure sat. Not Noak, not the thing that wore her face. Something older. It had no features, just a mass of shifting darkness and stitched mouths. Eyes blinked across its surface. Hands reached out and retracted without motion. It was silence, given form. Arun stepped forward. "What do you want?" The thing tilted, and from behind them, the phone buzzed. One new voicemail. From Noak. May played it. "He wants your voice, but you still have yours. Don't give it to him. Let me speak instead." May knelt, held the phone up toward the darkness. Then she did what Noak never could. She spoke the rite of release, not in chant, not in prayer, but in memory. She spoke Noak's name, told her story, reclaimed what had been denied to her. You were not forgotten. You were not alone. You did not vanish. You were buried, but now you are witnessed. The air cracked. The shadow recoiled. A scream tore through the chamber. Not from May, not from Arun, from every wall. The thing began to collapse inward like a building folding into itself. The stitched mouths tore open. Light poured from within. Not warm light, not heavenly. Just truth, raw, burning. Then silence. True silence. Not haunted, not waiting. Just still. When they stepped outside, dawn was breaking. The light touched the hallway in full. For the first time since they moved in, it reached all the way to the farthest wall. May turned to Arun. "She's gone." He nodded. And so is he. For the first time in weeks, there were no knocks in the night. No humming through the pipes. No crying behind the walls. No 3:33 a.m. messages waiting like loaded traps inside their phones. The silence was clean, empty but not heavy, still but not watchful. It felt like the apartment had exhaled. Arun and May sat by the window as morning poured into the room. She drank tea. He listened to the distant sounds of traffic. Everything felt ordinary again. And that's what made it terrifying. Because after everything they had seen, after everything they had heard, May knew one truth. Peace always comes before the final sound. It arrived just before noon, not in the usual way, not with a vibrating phone or a whispering wall. It came through the speaker system in the lobby. A soft, broken voice, May's voice, repeating a single sentence. "Don't let her leave. Don't let her leave. Don't let her leave." The receptionist called up in a panic, said the building's PA system had activated itself, said May's voice was playing, looping from every floor. They rushed downstairs. The sound had already stopped, but the cameras, the ones monitoring every hallway, had recorded something. The building manager hesitated before playing it for them. In the footage, May could be seen walking down the 6th floor corridor at 3:33 a.m. the night before. But in reality, she had never left the bed. And beside her, in the footage, walking in perfect step, was a copy of her. Same face, same clothes, same posture, but no eyes. Just two black holes where the eyes should be. The footage cut out at the elevator. May stood frozen. "That's not me," she said, and Arun whispered, "Then who is it?" They returned to the apartment, shaken. May turned off every reflective surface, unplugged the smart TV, covered the bathroom mirror. The silence was no longer comforting. It was anticipation. That night, as they sat in bed, the phone buzzed once. One voicemail from unknown. Arun answered first, but the message was blank, only static. May tapped hers, and her screen displayed something she'd never seen before. A text message, not a voicemail. It simply read, "She's still in the line." She tapped the message. Nothing opened. She deleted it. It reappeared. She turned off her phone. That's when the house phone rang. Not the mobile, the old landline plugged into the wall, a feature they'd never used, never set up. It rang once, then again, 3 times. She picked it up, and the voice that answered was her own. Not a playback, not a recording, but her speaking in real time. "I never left," the voice said. "I just needed someone else to carry the echo." Then another voice layered beneath hers, Knock's voice. "It's not over. You broke the chamber, but the sound still carries. There's always one more call." Then silence, and the line disconnected itself. Arun was already in the living room, pacing. He held up his phone. His voicemail had returned. One final message from Knock. He pressed play, and what they heard was not her voice. It was theirs, both of them speaking in unison, reciting things they had never said, fragments of rituals, snatches of prayers, phrases like, "He's learned the voice now. He doesn't need mirrors. He just needs memory. Your words, your breath, your name." The message cut to silence, then a soft sound, distant, echoing, a new voicemail tone. It wasn't theirs. Someone else's phone, someone else's apartment, someone new. May turned slowly to Arun. "He's calling another one." Arun nodded. "This was never about us. We were just the speaker." And that's when May said it. The line was never broken. It was only passed forward. They both stared at the floor, then at the closet, then at the empty frame where the mirror had once hung. Somewhere, in some other apartment, someone's phone was ringing now, and the voice on the other end was hers. "The apartment is clean now. No marks on the walls, no whispers in the dark, no mirrors where there shouldn't be. Just silence. Ordinary, lifeless silence." The cleaners came the day after May and Arun moved out. They scrubbed every surface, repainted the walls, replaced the fixtures. The cracked closet panel was nailed shut. The mirror, long gone, was never mentioned again. When the real estate agent arrived with his notepad and his smile, he stood in the center of the living room and took a long, satisfied breath. "Nice light," he said. "Nothing unusual here." He photographed the windows, the kitchen, the bathroom. He ignored the faint scrape mark along the floorboards near the wall, where the altar once sat. He didn't ask why the hallway closet smelled like burnt salt. He listed the unit the next morning. Unit 6B, spacious studio with city view. Quiet neighbors, newly renovated, move-in ready. He even offered a discount for a quick decision. A young couple visited later that week. They were newly engaged, optimistic, hopeful. They liked the layout, loved the natural light, didn't notice the way their voices didn't echo quite right in the corner of the room. The wife-to-be paused by the shoe rack near the door. Something made her glance to the side. There, hanging above the threshold, was a new mirror, perfectly clean, perfectly placed. She touched the edge of the frame. Her finger came away cold. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" her fiancé replied. She turned toward him slowly. Her reflection turned just a second later. The agent smiled politely behind them, pretending not to notice. They signed the paperwork that evening, moved in the following weekend. They found no leftover furniture, no strange smells, no hidden symbols. But the landline rang once at 3:33 a.m. on their first night. No caller ID, no voicemail, just a faint static in the air. And sitting on the counter, though neither remembered placing it there, was a brand new phone. Not theirs, unlocked, screen cracked, and waiting. A notification blinked softly. One new voicemail, from unknown. They never pressed play, not that night. But soon, one of them will. And the voice on the other end, it won't be knock. It won't be the thing she sealed. It will be May. Because when you listen long enough, when you echo back the silence, you become the voice that calls next. Unit 6B is empty now, but someone is always still inside.